Ever thought about packing up your bags and starting a new chapter of your life in Mexico? Well, you're not alone. The appeal of living abroad has been growing over the years, and Mexico has become one of the go-to destinations for those seeking an affordable cost of living without compromising on quality of life. This trend isn't just a passing fancy, but rather a conscious choice made by many who've realized that life can be enjoyed on a leaner budget, far from the maddening crowds of expensive cities. Mexico, with its rich culture, warm people, and appealing climate, has been drawing folks from all walks of life who've chosen to call it home. This isn't about sacrifice, but about making smart choices that allow you to live well and often for much less than you'd spend back home. So if you're curious about what it would cost to live in Mexico in 2024, stick around because we're about to dive into the details. First, let's talk about housing, a significant part of anyone's budget. Now, when it comes to Mexico in 2024, the average cost of renting an apartment can be quite a pleasant surprise, particularly if you're used to the steep prices in major U.S. cities. In Mexico, you can find a one-bedroom apartment in the city center for an average of about $500 a month. In contrast, a similar apartment in a big U.S. city like New York or San Francisco might set you back anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a month. That's quite a difference, isn't it? If you're looking for something bigger, a 3-bedroom apartment in Mexico's city center will cost you around $1,000 a month. Now, compare that to the same type of apartment in a U.S. city, which could easily cost you $4,000 or more a month. Even if you prefer to live outside of the city center, you're still looking at significant savings. A one-bedroom apartment in the outskirts of a Mexican city costs an average of $350 a month. In comparison, the same apartment in a less central area of a U.S. city can still cost you upwards of $1,500 a month. Of course, these are average prices, and they can vary based on the location and quality of the apartment. But even at the higher end of the scale, you're likely to find that housing in Mexico can be much more affordable than in the U.S. Now, some of you might be thinking about buying property instead of renting. Well, the good news is that the housing market in Mexico is also relatively affordable. On average, you can buy an apartment in the city center for around $1,500 per square meter. Again, this is significantly less than what you would pay in many U.S. cities, where prices can easily exceed $5,000 per square meter. So, whether you're looking to rent or buy, Mexico offers a range of affordable housing options. And remember, these savings on housing can free up your budget for other things like food, transportation, healthcare, or just enjoying everything Mexico has to offer. As you can see, housing in Mexico can be quite affordable, especially when compared to major U.S. cities. Now that we've covered housing, let's move on to another essential: food. When it comes to groceries in Mexico, a month's worth of food can be quite affordable. As of 2024, the average cost of groceries for a single person stands roughly at $150 a month. This includes staples like fresh fruits and vegetables, meat, dairy, and pantry items. Now, if you're wondering how this stacks up against the U.S., it's significantly cheaper. The same basket of groceries can cost nearly twice as much in major American cities. But what about those days when you just don't feel like cooking? Well, dining out in Mexico can be a real treat for your taste buds and your wallet. A meal at an inexpensive restaurant will set you back around $5. If you prefer a 3-course meal at a mid-range restaurant, expect to pay around $15. Again, this is quite a bargain compared to dining out in the U.S., where the average cost of a similar meal can easily exceed $25. And let's not forget about the street food scene in Mexico. It's vibrant, diverse, and incredibly affordable. From tacos to tamales, you can sample authentic Mexican cuisine for just a couple of dollars. However, it's important to remember that these are average costs, and actual prices can vary based on location and personal preferences. For instance, dining at high-end restaurants or buying imported groceries can significantly increase your monthly food expenditure. But on the whole, whether you're shopping at local markets or enjoying the rich culinary scene, food costs in Mexico are generally lower than in the U.S. So, whether you're a home cook or a foodie who loves dining out, Mexico's food scene can be quite budget-friendly. Next up is transportation, another crucial factor when considering the cost of living. In 2024, the average cost of public transportation in Mexico is quite affordable. A one-way ticket on local transport costs roughly $1. For those who prefer the convenience of a monthly pass, you're looking at around $20. That's a significant saving when compared to the average cost in the United States, which can be as high as $70 in some cities. But what about driving? Well, the cost of owning and maintaining a car in Mexico is also generally lower than the US. The average price of a liter of gasoline in Mexico is around $1. Yes, you heard it right, a liter, not a gallon. So, if you do the math, you'll find that it's almost half the price of gasoline in the US and the cost of the car itself. Cars in Mexico can be slightly cheaper than their equivalents in the US. However, it's important to note that while the initial cost might be less, the depreciation rate is typically higher in Mexico. Now, let's talk about maintenance. The cost of maintaining a car in Mexico is generally lower. This is mostly due to lower labor costs. So, if you're a fan of road trips or just prefer the freedom of driving your own vehicle, Mexico can be a more economical choice. However, as with any country, it's important to factor in the cost of insurance. Auto insurance in Mexico is mandatory and can vary widely based on the type of coverage you choose. On average, expect to pay around $300 per year for a basic liability policy. So whether you prefer to drive or use public transportation, the cost of getting around in Mexico is typically less than in the US. Let's not forget about utilities, another important part of the budget. Utilities, including electricity, water, and internet, are essential for a comfortable living. In Mexico, the average monthly cost for these utilities for an 85 square meters apartment is around $50. Yes, you heard it right. Just $50 for all your basic utilities. But remember, these costs can vary based on usage and location. For instance, if you are living in a larger house or use air conditioning extensively, your electricity bill might be higher. Similarly, if you live in a city center, you might pay a bit more for your internet connection. But overall, utilities in Mexico are quite affordable, especially when compared to the costs in the US. Now you might be wondering, how can I save on utilities? Well, there are several ways to do this. First, consider using energy-efficient appliances, which can significantly reduce your electricity consumption. Second, consider conserving water. Not only is this good for the environment, but it can also help keep your water bill low. And finally, when it comes to internet, shop around. There are many providers and prices can vary significantly. So, take the time to find the best deal for you. So, while utilities are an additional cost to consider, they're generally quite affordable in Mexico. And with a bit of effort, you can even find ways to save on these costs. Now let's move on to healthcare costs, another crucial factor to consider when thinking about living in Mexico. Moving on to our 6th chapter, transportation costs in Mexico. Let's delve into the specifics. Living in Mexico in 2024, find that the transportation system is a blend of public and private services. The public transportation system, including buses and metros, is available to all residents, including foreigners. The cost is quite economical, depending on your usage. For an average person, the annual cost might be around $200. Yes, you got it right, just $200 a year. What about the private transportation system, you may ask? Well, that's also quite reasonable, especially when compared to the United States. A taxi ride, for instance, might set you back about $10, while using ride-hailing services like Uber costs around $5 for a short trip. That's a fraction of what you'd pay in the US. Now, let's talk about owning a car. If you prefer private transportation, a car insurance plan from a reputable company will cost around $1,200 a year. That's about $100 a month. Again, this is significantly less than what you'd expect to pay in the US. Of course, prices can vary depending on your car model, driving record, and the level of coverage you want. But on average, these figures provide a good indication of what you can expect to pay for transportation in Mexico in 2024. But remember, isn't everything. While transportation in Mexico is generally cheaper, it's also important to consider the quality and availability of services. Mexico has a growing number of cities with modern transportation systems. However, in rural areas, access to quality transportation can be more challenging. So, getting around in Mexico can be more affordable, especially if you're used to US prices. But as with everything, it's essential to do your research and ensure you're comfortable with the level of service you'll be receiving. After all, your time and convenience are priceless. Now, let's talk about some other important costs: education, childcare, and entertainment. Starting with education, public schools in Mexico are free of charge. However, if you prefer private education, the costs might surprise you. A private school education in Mexico can cost anywhere from $300 to $800 per month per child, depending on the school's reputation and the city you are in. Moving on to childcare, costs can vary, but an average cost for a full-time daycare service is around $200 per month. Babysitting services, on the other hand, can cost around $3 to $5 per hour, which is quite affordable compared to the rates in the US. Now let's talk about entertainment. Dining out in Mexico is a joy, not just because of the delicious food, but also because it's quite affordable. A meal at an inexpensive restaurant will cost you around $5, while a 3-course meal for 2 at a mid-range restaurant can cost around $20. Going to the movies? A movie ticket in Mexico will cost you around $3. Other leisure activities, like going to a fitness club, will cost you around $30 per month, while a monthly internet subscription is around $20. So, while these costs can add up, they're still generally more affordable in Mexico compared to the US. But, as always, remember to do your research and factor in these costs into your budget, especially if you have children or you're a fan of dining out and other entertainment activities. Before we wrap up, let's not forget about those miscellaneous and unexpected expenses that often tend to sneak up on us. It's always wise to have a safety net for these unforeseen costs. These can include things like home repairs, car maintenance, or even unexpected medical expenses. Let's say, for example, your car breaks down and needs a major repair. In Mexico, the cost could range anywhere between $50 to $200, depending on the extent of the damage. Home repairs, on the other hand, can vary greatly, but you can expect to shell out anywhere from $100 to $500 for minor fixes. Now, if we talk about unexpected medical expenses, even though healthcare is generally affordable in Mexico, an unexpected hospital visit can set you back anywhere from $30 to $300, depending on the nature of the treatment. Also, let's not forget about personal expenses like clothing, personal care, and other miscellaneous items, which could cost around $50 to $100 per month. It's always a good idea to set aside a portion of your budget for these unexpected expenses, because, as we all know, life has a way of throwing curveballs at us when we least expect it. So, plan wisely and always be prepared. Transitioning into the final scene, Scene 8, Conclusion. We've dug deep into various expenditures like housing, food, transportation, healthcare, education, childcare, and entertainment in Mexico. Now, let's see the grand total of all these costs. The sum of the average cost of living in Mexico in 2024, which now includes the costs of education, childcare, and entertainment, amounts to roughly about $1,500 per month. In comparison, the monthly average cost of living in the United States comes up to around $3,500. This illustrates a significant difference indeed. The key factors contributing to Mexico's lower cost of living comprise of reasonably priced food, transportation, healthcare, education, childcare, and recreational activities. In conclusion, it's apparent that living in Mexico can be quite economical, thereby making it an option for those contemplating a move overseas. However, do keep in mind that each individual's cost of living might fluctuate based on personal preferences and lifestyle. Hence, it's essential to conduct thorough research, plan your move carefully. Best of luck on your journey.